When we come to seasons of discouragement in our lives, we have two choices. We can either lay down and quit, or we can get up and turn our focus back on God. Today's Truth for Life with Alistair Begg takes us to that important decision in the life of Elijah. It's part of a series called Dangers, Toils, and Snares, Seeing God's Faithfulness in Life's Trials. And as we begin, we'll highlight a few points from yesterday's message. Here's Alistair Begg.
Most of us find it okay to march when the band is playing and the crowd is out and all is going well. It is a little more challenging when the wheels come off our wagon in the way that we used to sing in that song when you travel in the car with your grandpa, you know, 4 wheels on my wagon and I'm still rolling along, and then 3 and I'm still rolling along, and then down to 0 and I ain't rolling along. And let's be honest enough tonight to say there are times when we get up in the morning or we turn around one afternoon and all of a sudden it would appear that every single wheel came off the wagon and we are certainly not rolling. We're stuck. I think there are people here tonight, and despite the fact that the hymn singing has been great and the opportunity for fellowship has been fine, you're not exactly on the mountaintop. You're rather in the valley. There's been a change in your life from faith to fear. Well, then let's just learn here from Elijah, because the reason that he found himself in this condition was largely because his focus changed. He started, as it were, to look at God through his circumstances rather than to look at his circumstances through God. There is a reason that the King James Version translates verse 3, and Elijah saw and ran for his life. He looked at things, but looked at them differently now. Perhaps it was simply that he was so tired. And when you get really tired, you're usually the last one to know. We keep going and going and going. And eventually somebody says to us, if we don't give out first, they say, hey, let me tell you something. When you're tired, there are a number of things you mustn't do. When you're really tired, don't write important letters. When you're really tired, don't quit your job or get a new one. When you're really tired, don't try and assess your spiritual condition. And when you're really tired, definitely don't try and assess the spiritual condition of anybody else. Because with that fatigue comes a change in focus. And the focus shifted for this individual. He began to walk by sight and not by faith, and so his peace was affected. His spiritual prosperity was eroded. He had magnified the difficulties, and he was beginning to become paralyzed. Admittedly, an angry woman is an awesome opponent, but God was more than able to meet that. Genesis chapter 12, in the encounter of Abram with the circumstances that weren't all the best, reveal the exact same thing. After God has called Abram out, there is a famine which arises in the land, and as a result, Abram goes down into Egypt. He goes there to live there for a while because the famine is severe. And as he's about to enter Egypt, he says to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. That must have made her feel good. Don't know whether he said it in the morning or the evening, whatever it was, but that's always a good start to the day, you know. I know what a beautiful woman you are. She didn't know what was coming next. He was about to jeopardize her purity. He was about to jeopardize her life. He was about to jeopardize their marriage for the sake of his own neck. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. You call that a giant? You call that a hero of the faith? How in the world can this happen? From the great success of his early beginning to the immediacy of a circumstance that is famine and that is warfare, and he crumbles like a pack of cards. The longer we live, the more we ought to be sympathetic with the conditions of men and women around us and recognize that what we experience is not alien to them either. Elijah had not only begun to focus on the circumstances and clouded God in it, but he had begun to focus on himself. Verse 9 of 1 Kings 19, he'd gone into a cave to spend the night. This was after he'd been strengthened, as we'll see in a moment. And the word of the Lord came to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" You call this a place for a vacation, Elijah? What are you doing in a cave? Listen to his reply. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, put your prophets to death with the sword." Now get this. "I, even I, am the only one left." Verse 14, "I," again, he says, "have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty." The end of verse 14, again, "I am the only one left." Anytime we find ourselves with a threefold "I," we are in danger. Elijah had fallen into the self-trap. He had fallen into the notion of believing that he was the only one who was doing anything. Did you ever have one of those days? I'm the only person in here that cares about this. I'm the only one that's doing anything around here. It can be something as simple as setting up the chairs or putting out the cups and saucers for a fellowship evening. And because Mrs. X never showed up and Mrs. Y said she wasn't coming and another lady, you're the only one there. And so you have a little party for yourself, a little pity party. You know, I'm the only person left around here that when I say it, I do it. This place is full of renegades and rascals. I'm the only one, Lord. You know, I've been very zealous about these cups and saucers. I've never missed a Thursday. Anytime we find ourselves doing that, we're probably in great danger, because the fact is the only reason that we've ever known any faithfulness in our lives is because we have been kept by God's power. As Peter tells us in 1 Peter 1, verse 5, it is because through faith we have been able to stand. Anybody here tonight, and you've been coming into these meetings and you've been congratulating yourself saying, you know, I'm the only one. The fact is you're not. Elijah was in the predicament because he was out of focus, but he was also out of fellowship. You see, whenever we take matters into our own hands, then faith and hope are no longer exercised. And when faith and hope are no longer exercised, then they will be replaced by something, and usually by discontentedness and a lack of peace. The progress to despondency in Elijah's life is just very clear to see. In verse 3, he runs away. In verse 4, he ends up in the desert. He finds a little tree, the broom tree, and he sits down underneath it. And he prays that he might die. We don't have time to expand this tonight. I don't want to get into it over my head either. But if we're going to take this at face value, what Elijah is saying is, I've just had enough. I don't want to face another day. I don't want to see another person. God, I want to die. There is all the difference in the world, dear ones, between anticipating the glory of heaven with joyful expectancy and lying down on the job. Some time ago, I was asked to go and visit an elderly lady. They told me that she was dying. And so I went to see her. And when I got there, she was certainly lying down. And she had an oxygen supply that ran from a large tank that had been put in her home, through a tube, and to her nose. Now, I'm no expert on death and dying, but I've sat at the bedside of a lot of people that are dying. And I'm certainly not a doctor, we've made that clear, right? But neither the physical situation nor my own spirit of discernment within me told me that this lady was anywhere close to dying. Everybody was very quiet. They were all going around the house in a kind of pre-death nuptial. But when I got in the room, I didn't sense that at all. So I just spoke loud. Oh, hello, Mrs. So-and-so. How are you doing? Shh. Don't you know the ladies? I said, hey, out of here. Within 15 minutes, this lady was sitting up in bed having a real royal conversation with me. Today, she's running all around Cleveland. She's in the mall. She's all over the place. What she'd done was she got herself under a broom tree. She laid down and she said, that's it. I'm finished now, Lord. Now, just take me home. And the Lord said, no, I'm going to send you Begg. And he'll shake you up a wee bit, and you'll be up on your feet, and you'll be running all around annoying your husband for another 5 or 6 years. Which is exactly what's going on. Now, I don't know your lives. I don't know your hearts. I know many of you live alone. I know there must be times of discouragement in your lives. Don't find a broom tree for yourself and lie down under it. Do you hear me? God has purposes for you. Remember what I've told you every day. Every day you get your legs over the bed is a sign that God is not finished with you. And even from your bed or from your chair. So let's learn by example what not to do in relationship to Elijah here. He runs away, he goes to the desert, he finds a tree, he sits underneath it, he says, I've had enough, and he requests that he might die. One of the biggest problems that Elijah faces is the problem of self-pity. And so God comes to him and he refreshes him. Look what he does. After he had lain down under the tree and fell asleep, an angel came and touched him and said, get up. Do you like getting woken up when you're asleep? If he had really needed to sleep, the Lord would have let him sleep, but the Lord knew he needed to get up. So he sends an angel and he says, get up and eat. And he looked around, and there by his bed was a cake of bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. And he ate and he drank and he lay down. So he must have been sleepy, right? But he was supposed to eat. So he ate and then he lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and he ate and he drank, and strengthened by that food, he traveled for 40 days and 40 nights. I mean, that's what you call a drink of water, right? I mean, that's amazing. If we get some of this bread and market it, it would be incredible. Until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God, and then it was when he got there that he goes into the cave and he spends the night. And even after the Lord has come and refreshed him and picked him up and sent him on this big journey, still he's in the cave. Still he's at this nonsense about, I'm the only guy that's left, Lord, that's serving you.